Welcome back to Zen Mind Temple tonight. As you settle in for rest, you'll discover ancient wisdom that has transformed lives for centuries. These are not ordinary stories, but gateways to understanding yourself and the world more deeply. Many have shared how these teachings bring not just deeper sleep, but clarity that follows into waking life insights, appearing just when needed most. This is the hidden power of these ancient tales. They work within us in ways our conscious minds cannot always grasp. Tonight's journey begins with something special: principles so profound yet practical that they formed the foundation for Zen's first arrival in the Western world. What might change if your heart could burn with commitment while your eyes remained as cool as dead ashes as your body grows heavier? Allow these teachings to meet you exactly where you are. Simply receive them as you would the sound of distant waves, without effort, without struggle. Let each breath carry you deeper into relaxation as we begin our journey. Imagine a temple courtyard, bathed in the soft light of early morning. The stone steps, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, stretch from the gate to the main hall. Dewdrops cling to the edges of the steps, catching the light like scattered pearls. A young monk, his robe still crisp from the morning's washing, bends over these steps with a small broom in his hand. His brow is furrowed, not with the effort of sweeping, but with a kind of quiet frustration. This monk's name is Huineng. He has been tasked with keeping the courtyard clean, a simple enough duty, or so he thought. But today, there is a problem. A bamboo grove stands just beyond the courtyard wall, and the wind is stirring. As the wind moves through the bamboo, the leaves rustle and dance, their shadows stretching across the stone steps like 1,000 tiny fingers. Huineng sweeps, and the shadows shift. He sweeps again, and more shadows take their place. It is as if the steps are being swept by an invisible hand, undoing his work as quickly as he does it. He has been at this for hours now. The sun has climbed higher in the sky, and sweat beads on his forehead. His arms ache from the repetitive motion, but still the shadows remain. Why is this so difficult? He mutters to himself, his voice barely audible above the whisper of the wind in the bamboo. The master said to keep the steps clean. But how can I, when these shadows will not stay away? Just then, the sound of sandals on stone catches his ear. He looks up to see the temple's abbot, a wise old man with a face like a well-worn scroll, standing at the top of the steps. The abbot's eyes are crinkled with what might be amusement, or perhaps understanding. He watches Huineng for a moment, saying nothing, as the young monk continues to sweep, his movements growing more hurried and desperate. Finally, the abbot speaks. His voice is soft, but it carries across the courtyard like a stone skipping on water. Huineng, he says, what are you doing? Huineng straightens, wiping a hand across his forehead. I am sweeping the steps, master, but these bamboo shadows, they keep coming back. No matter how much I sweep, I cannot rid the steps of them. The abbot nods slowly, his gaze turning to the bamboo grove. And what do you think would happen if you stopped sweeping? Huineng blinks, confused. But then the steps would be dirty. The shadows would cover them completely, would they? The abbot asks. He takes a few steps down, pausing beside a particularly stubborn shadow, cast by a long, slender bamboo leaf. Look at this shadow, Huineng. Is it dirty? Huineng frowns. Well, no, master. It is just a shadow. Then why do you wish to sweep it away? Because the steps must be clean. You said so. The abbot smiles gently. I said the steps must be clean. I did not say they must be free of shadows. Tell me, when the sun sets, what happens to these shadows? Huineng thinks for a moment. They disappear. And when the moon rises, they return, but different, longer, thinner. And when it rains, the bamboo still moves, but the shadows are faint, blurred by the clouds. The abbot pauses, letting these Observations settle. So the shadows are never the same, are they? They come and go, shift and change, without any effort from you. They are part of the natural world, like the wind, like the rain, like the rising and setting of the sun. Huineng looks down at his broom and back up at the abbot. But then what is the point of sweeping? To sweep the dust, Huineng. They, actual dust, the dirt that clings to the stone. The shadows are not dirt. They are just shadows. They do not stain the steps. They do not make them unclean. They are simply a reflection of what is happening around them. Huineng is silent. For a moment, processing this. He thinks about how he has been struggling, how he has been trying to control something that cannot be controlled. He thinks about how the more he focused on the shadows, the more frustrated he became, and the less he noticed the actual dust that was gathering in the corners of the steps. But the master who taught me before said, "Keep your mind as clean, as a polished mirror, so that no dust can cling to it," Huineng says, recalling a lesson from his early days. Does not the same apply to the steps? Should they not be free of all impurities? The abbot nods. That is a good teaching, but perhaps you have misunderstood it. The mirror is not meant to reflect nothing, Huineng. A mirror that reflects nothing is just a piece of metal. A mirror is meant to reflect the world as it is. Trees, clouds, people, all passing through its surface. The dust that the teaching speaks of is not the reflections, but the attachment to reflections. It is the thought that the mirror should only reflect beautiful things, or that the reflections are permanent, or that they define the mirror's worth. He reaches out and touches the stone step gently, as if it were a living thing. These steps are like that mirror. They will reflect the world around them, the bamboo, the sun, the moon, the stars. That is their nature. The dust is the clutter that obscures their true nature, the grime that builds up over time and needs to be swept away. But the shadows, they are just part of the reflection. To try to sweep them away is to misunderstand what the steps are and what the world is. Huineng looks at the bamboo grove again. The wind has died down a little, and the shadows have stilled for the moment. He notices how the light plays through the leaves, creating patterns that are almost beautiful. He realizes that he has been so focused on removing the shadows that he has not stopped to see them. So I should sweep the dust, he says slowly. But let the shadows be? The abbot smiles. Exactly. And perhaps, in time, you will learn to do the same with your mind. To let the thoughts come and go, like the shadows, without trying to sweep them away. To focus instead on the clarity beneath, the stone of your true nature, which remains unchanged no matter what dances across its surface. Huineng sets down his broom, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He looks at the steps again, and, for the first time, he sees them clearly not as a battlefield where he is losing a war against shadows, but as a part of the world, connected to the bamboo, the wind, the sun. He sees the actual dust that needs to be swept, and he knows that this is a task he can accomplish without frustration, without struggle. He picks up the broom again, but this time, his movements are slower, more deliberate. He sweeps the dust from the corners, careful not to disturb the shadows, which now seem almost like old friends. As he works, he thinks about the abbot's words, about the mirror and the reflections. He thinks about his own mind, how it is often filled with thoughts that come and go like the bamboo shadows. He realizes that he has been trying to sweep those thoughts away too, to make his mind clean in a way that is impossible, and in doing so, he has been missing the point. The mind, he begins to understand, is not meant to be empty. It is meant to be aware of the thoughts as they come, aware of them as they go, without clinging to them, without pushing them away. Like the steps, which simply exist, allowing the world to play across their surface, the mind can exist in a state of calm clarity, even as thoughts and feelings pass through it. When he finishes sweeping, the steps are clean, not in the sense that they are free of shadows, but in the sense that the dust is gone. The bamboo still sways in the wind, and the shadows still dance. But Huineng no longer minds. He stands back, looking at his work, and feels a sense of peace that he has not felt in a long time. The abbot, who has been watching silently, nods approvingly. Well done, Huineng. Sometimes, the hardest thing is to know what to sweep and what to let be. Remember this lesson, and you will find that many things in life become easier. Huineng bows deeply. Thank you, Master. I think I understand now. And he does. Not completely. Perhaps some lessons take a lifetime to fully absorb, but in that moment, standing in the courtyard, watching the bamboo shadows play across the clean stone steps, he feels a glimmer of understanding, a tiny crack in the wall and his own confusion dot in the days that follow. Huineng continues to sweep the courtyard, but his approach is different. He no longer wastes energy on the shadows. He focuses on the dust, and when he is done, he takes a moment to sit on the steps and watch the bamboo. He notices how the shadows change with the time of day short and stubby at noon, long and elegant in the evening. He notices how they disappear completely on cloudy days, only to return when the sun comes out again. He begins to see the beauty in their impermanence, in their constant change. He also begins to apply this lesson to his meditation practice. Before, when thoughts would arise during meditation, he would struggle to push them away, becoming frustrated when they kept coming back. Now, he tries to treat them like the bamboo shadows, acknowledging them, but not attaching to them, letting them come and go without judgment. He finds that his mind becomes calmer, more peaceful, not because there are fewer thoughts, but because he is no longer at war with them. One evening, as the sun is setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Huineng sits on the steps, watching the bamboo shadows stretch long across the courtyard. The abbot joins him, and they sit in silence for a while, enjoying the quiet beauty of the moment. You seem more at peace these days, the abbot says finally. Huineng nods. I think. I am, Master. It is amazing how much easier life becomes when you stop trying to control everything. The abbot smiles. Control is a funny thing, is it not? We think it will bring us peace, but it usually brings us more stress. The world is full of things we cannot control: the weather, the actions of others, the passage of time, the shadows on the steps. Our peace does not come from controlling these things, but from accepting them and focusing on what we can control: our own thoughts, our own actions, our own reactions. Huineng thinks about this. It is like the bamboo, he says. It does not fight the wind. It bends, it sways, but it does not break. It accepts the wind as part of its life, and in doing so, it survives. Exactly, the abbot says. And so it is with us. We cannot stop the winds of change from blowing through our lives, but we can learn to bend, to adapt, to let them pass through us without breaking us. We can learn to distinguish between the dust and the shadows, between what we can change and what we must accept. As the sun dips below the horizon, the shadows fade and the first stars begin to twinkle in the sky. Huineng stands up, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He has learned more in these few days than he did in months of studying ancient texts. He has learned that wisdom is not always found in words, but in the quiet moments, in the observation of the world around him, in the willingness to let go of his attachments and see things as they are. He looks forward to tomorrow, to sweeping the steps again, not as a chore, but as a practice, a reminder of the lesson he has learned. He knows that there will be days when he forgets, when he finds himself trying to sweep away the shadows again, but that is okay. Each time he remembers, each time he returns to the present moment, to the task at hand, he is deepening his understanding. strengthening his resolve to live a life of peace and acceptance. And so, as the temple bells ring out, calling the monks to evening prayer, Huineng walks towards the main hall, his heart light, his mind clear. He knows that the journey ahead is long, that there is much more to learn, but for now, he is content to be where he is, to be who he is in this moment, with no shadows to sweep away and no dust left unacknowledged. The morning mist clung to the mountains like a soft blanket, seeping through the wooden slats of the temple's tea pavilion. A scholar sat cross-legged on a tatami mat, his silk robes rustling faintly as he adjusted his posture. His fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the arm of his chair, a habit from years of pacing library aisles, reciting verses under his breath. Across from him, an old Zen master knelt beside a low table, his movements as deliberate as the turning of a prayer wheel. He lifted a clay teapot, its surface glazed in earthy tones, and poured steaming water into a small, unadorned cup. The scholar had traveled far to reach this temple, his pack heavy with scrolls and notes from a lifetime of penance. Study. He could quote the sutras from memory, debate the finer points of enlightenment with scholars twice his age, and dissect the meaning of emptiness until dawn. Yet here he was, his mind buzzing like a hive of bees, unable to still the noise. Long enough to catch a single thought. "I've read every text," he said, his voice tight with the effort of containing his frustration. "Memorized every commentary. I understand the philosophy, the logic, the path, but when I sit to meditate, my mind races. When I try to feel peace, I feel nothing. Just this endless chatter." He gestured vaguely at his chest, as if the words were tangled there, suffocating him. The Zen master nodded, his eyes half closed, as if listening to a sound only he could hear. He set the teapot down with a soft clink, and the sound hung in the air, a momentary punctuation to the scholars. "Words. You seek stillness," he said, his voice like water over smooth stones. "I do," the scholar replied. "But it eludes me, like trying to catch smoke with my hands." The Zen master reached for the teapot again, pouring more water into the scholar's cup. Steam curled upward, blurring the edges of the pavilion where the mist still lingered. The cup filled quickly, and soon the water spilled over the sides, pooling on the table, soaking into the tatami mat beneath. "Stop," the scholar said, leaning forward. "It's full. Can't you see? The water is spilling everywhere." The Zen master paused, his hand hovering over the teapot. He looked up at the scholar, his gaze steady, and smiled, a small, quiet smile that seemed to hold a lifetime of understanding. "Your mind is like this cup," he said as the scholar blinked. "My mind? A cup that's full?" "Yes," the Zen master said, setting the teapot aside. "It is filled to the brim with what you know, with the words you've memorized, the debates you've won, the ideas you cling to like treasures. You come here seeking more, but there is no room. The cup cannot hold another drop until it is emptied." The scholar frowned, his fingers tapping faster now. "But these are not trivial things. They are the foundation of my understanding. Without them, how can I build toward enlightenment?" The Zen master picked up the cup, tilting it to pour the water into a small basin beside the table. The water drained away, leaving the cup empty. He set it back down and poured a fresh cup, filling it halfway, then pushed it toward the scholar. "Drink," he said. The scholar picked up the cup, the ceramic warm against his palms. He sipped slowly, the tea bitter at first, then blooming into a subtle sweetness, like wildflowers unfolding in spring. "It's good," he admitted, surprised. "Was it less good because it was not full?" The Zen master asked. "No, but then, why must your mind be full to be wise?" The Zen master said, his voice gentle but firm. "A cup that is always full can never taste new tea. It can never be refreshed. It can only spill over, making a mess of what it already holds. The scholar set the cup down, his fingers stilling. He thought of his meditation practice, how he counted his breaths like coins, judging each inhale and exhale as if they were a test he might fail. He thought of conversations with other seekers, how he listened not to learn, but to find flaws in their words to prove he knew better. He thought of the way he clung to his knowledge, as if it were armor, protecting him from the uncertainty of not knowing. I never thought of it that way, he said, his voice softer now. I thought knowledge was the path. The more I knew, the closer I would be. Knowledge is a finger pointing at the moon, the Zen master said. But if you stare at the finger, you will never see the moon. You have spent so long studying the finger, you have forgotten to look up. He poured more tea into the scholar's cup, filling it to the brim again. This time, the scholar did not flinch when the water spilled. He watched it spread across the table, soaking into the mat, and thought of all the times he had refused to let go of old grudges, of missed opportunities, of ideas that no longer served him. The spilling is not a mistake, the Zen master said, as if reading his thoughts. It is a reminder that holding on too tightly to what we have prevents us from receiving what is to come. In the days that followed, the scholar stayed at the temple. He did not spend his time in the library as he had planned. Instead, he helped the monks tend to the garden, his hands digging into the soil, feeling the earth between his fingers, instead of clutching scrolls. He fetched water from the well, the bucket heavy on his shoulders, his breath steady instead of racing with thoughts of the next debate. He sat with the Zen master each morning, drinking tea, and for the first time in years, he listened not to the words, but to the silence between them, to the wind in the pines, to the soft rustle of the Zen master's robes. One afternoon, as they sat in the pavilion, the mist long since burned away by the sun, the Zen master asked, "What do you hear?" The scholar closed his eyes, listening. "The wind," he said, "a bird somewhere in the trees. The distant sound of a broom sweeping the courtyard." "Good," the Zen master said. "And what do you feel?" "The sun on my face, the rough texture of the mat beneath me, the warmth of the tea cup in my hands." "Good," the Zen master said again. "And what do you know for certain?" The scholar opened his eyes, ready to list 100 truths he had memorized, but the words stuck in his throat. In that moment, he realized he knew nothing not for certain. Not the future, not the past, not even the present, beyond what he could see and hear and feel right now. And for the first time, that did not scare him. It felt freeing. "I know nothing," he said, and the words felt like a prayer. Zen master smiled. That is the empty cup. Not a mind that is blank, but a mind that is open. A mind that can receive the world as it is, without filtering it through what it thinks it knows. A mind that understands that the deepest wisdom is not in the answers, but in the questions. The scholar thought of all the books he had read, all the debates he had won, all the knowledge he had amassed. It was not worthless, he realized. It was just not enough. Like a map, it could show him the way, but it could not take him there. For that, he needed to let go of the map, to step into the unknown, to walk the path with an open heart and an empty cup. When he left the temple a week later, he left his scrolls behind. Not all of them, just the ones he had been clinging to, the ones that had become more important than the wisdom they contained. He carried a single cup with him, a simple clay cup, like the one the Zen master had used. Each morning, he filled it halfway with tea, and as he drank, he reminded himself to stay open, to stay curious, to remember that the most important lessons in life are not the ones we learn from books, but the ones we let seep into our souls, one small, unexpected drop at a time. The rain fell in thin silver threads, stitching the gray sky to the green earth. In a rice paddy at the edge of the village, a farmer bent over his work, his back curved like a crescent moon. His straw hat sagged with water, and his coarse linen trousers were soaked through, clinging to his legs as he moved. Yet there was no hurry in his movements, no frustration at the weather. He simply planted each rice seedling in the soft mud, one after another, as if the rain were not even there. Young disciple, huddled under the overhang of a nearby hut, watched him. The disciple's robes were pulled tight around his shoulders, and he shivered slightly, both from the cold and from a growing sense of confusion. He had come to this village with his master, a wise old Zen master, to learn about flow, about moving through life with the same ease that a river flows around rocks. But so far, all he had seen was a farmer getting wet. "Master," the disciple said, turning to the Zen master who stood beside him, hands tucked into the sleeves of his own robes. "Why is he working in the rain? The seeds will wash away. The mud is too soft. He'll only have to redo it all when the sun comes out. It's not efficient. It's not logical." The Zen master smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Is that what you see?" he asked, his voice as calm as the deep part of a lake. The disciple nodded, gesturing toward the farmer. "He's struggling against the weather. He's wasting his energy. If he waited for the rain to stop, he could work faster, better. He's fighting the current instead of going with it." The Zen master did not answer immediately. Instead, he pointed to the farmer's hands. The disciple squinted, watching as the man reached into a basket beside him, plucked a seedling, and pressed it into the mud. There was no force in the movement, no strain. It was as if the seedling were meant to be there, as if the mud were welcoming it home. "Look at how he holds the seedling," the Zen master said softly. "Not too tight, not too loose. Just enough to guide it into the earth. He does not force it. He does not demand that the mud harden for him. He works with what is given." The disciple frowned. "But the rain is not an enemy," the Zen master said. "It is part of the field, part of the day, part of the work. The farmer knows this. He knows that the rain softens the soil, making it easier to plant. He knows that the water will help the seedlings take root. He knows that if he waits for perfect weather, he will wait forever." The disciple thought about this. In the temple, he had been taught to seek balance, to avoid extremes. But he had always thought that meant avoiding discomfort, waiting for the right moment. He had never considered that sometimes the right moment is the one that is happening, even if it is wet or messy or inconvenient. "Watch his feet," the Zen master said. The disciple looked again. The farmer's feet sank slightly into the mud with each step, but he adjusted his weight smoothly, shifting from one foot to the other without hesitation. He did not try to keep his feet dry or clean. He did not struggle to stay upright. He moved as if the mud were supporting him, as if it were part of his body. "He is not fighting the mud," the Zen master said. "He is using it. The mud holds the seedlings in place. It nourishes them. It is not an obstacle. It is a partner." The disciple thought of his own life. How many times had he resisted the mud of difficult situations, arguments with fellow monks, tedious chores, moments of doubt? How many times had he struggled against them, wishing they were different, instead of working with them, learning from them? He thought of his meditation practice, how he would grow frustrated when his mind wandered, as if that were a failure, instead of accepting it as part of the process. "Why does he look so peaceful?" the disciple asked, watching the farmer pause for a moment to wipe the rain from his face. There was a smile on the man's lips, faint but real, because he has stopped asking the world to be different, his Zen master said. He has accepted the rain, the mud, the work. He is not waiting for happiness to come to him later, when the work is done, when the sun is shining. He is finding it now, in the act of planting, in the rhythm of his body, in the knowledge that he is doing what needs to be done. The rain picked up, drumming harder on the hut's thatched roof. The disciple flinched as a cold drop slid down the back of his neck, but the farmer did not seem to notice. He simply kept planting, his movements steady, almost meditative. Does he never get tired? The disciple asked. Of course he does, the Zen master said. But tiredness is just another part of the day. Like the rain, like the mud, he does not fight it. He rests when he needs to, works when he can. He does not demand that his body be stronger than it is. He listens to it as he listens to the field. The disciple thought of how he pushed himself during long periods of sitting meditation, ignoring the pain in his legs, the stiffness in his back, as if his body were an enemy to be conquered. He thought of how he would judge himself for feeling tired, as if that were a weakness. He wondered what it would be like to treat his body with the same kindness the farmer showed the earth, with respect, with attention, with acceptance. As if sensing his thoughts, the Zen master said, the river does not flow faster because it is in a hurry. It does not stop because there are rocks in its path. It flows around them, over them, through them. It adapts. It persists. It does not ask the rocks to move. It finds a way to move with them. The disciple nodded slowly. He thought of a time when he had tried to cross a swollen river during a journey. He had fought against the current, struggling to keep his balance, and nearly been swept away. It was only when he let go of his fear, when he stopped trying to control his path, that he had found his way to the other side, carried by the current rather than fighting against it. I think I see, he said. It is not about being passive. It is about being present, about seeing what is, not what you wish were, about working with the world, not against it. The Zen master smiled. Yes, and notice when you work with the world, you do not need to force anything. The farmer does not need to shout at the seedlings to grow, or the rain to stop. He simply does his part, and the rest follows. This is the way of flow. This is the way of peace. As the afternoon wore on, the rain began to ease. The farmer stood up, stretching his back slowly, and looked out over the field. The disciple watched as he surveyed his work, his eyes moving from one seedling to the next, as if greeting each one. There was no pride, no sense of accomplishment, just a quiet satisfaction, like that of a parent tucking a child into bed. He is not attached to the outcome, the Zen master said, as if reading the disciple's mind. He has planted the seeds, but he knows that growth depends on many things: the rain, the sun, the soil, the wind. He has done his work, and now he trusts in the process. He does not worry about whether the rice will grow. He trusts that it will, in its own time, in its own way. The disciple thought of how often he worried about the future, about whether he would ever achieve enlightenment, about whether he was doing enough, being enough. He thought of how that worry pulled him out of the present, making him miss the beauty of the moment, the lessons that were right in front of him. The farmer gathered his tools, slinging his basket over his shoulder, and began to walk toward the village. He passed by the hut where the disciple and the Zen master stood and nodded at them, a small, friendly gesture. His clothes were soaked, his hair matted, but there was a light in his eyes that the disciple had never seen in the most learned scholars or the most devout monks. Thank you, the disciple said before he could stop himself. The farmer smiled. The field thanks you for watching, he said, as if that were the most natural thing in the world. Then he walked on, his steps light despite the mud, as if he were dancing with the earth, rather than struggling against it. As the sun began to break through the clouds, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, the disciple and the Zen master walked back to their temporary dwelling at the village temple. The disciple felt a sense of calm he had not felt in a long time, a lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. "Tomorrow," the Zen master said, "we will help the farmer. You will plant seedlings in the rain, if it rains. You will feel the mud between your toes, the water on your skin. You will learn to move not with force, but with flow." The disciple nodded. He was not looking forward to getting wet, to getting dirty, to the physical discomfort, but he was curious to see what it would feel like to work with the world instead of against it. Curious to see if he could find that same light in his eyes that the farmer had. That night, as he lay in his simple cot, listening to the last drops of rain fall on the roof, the disciple thought about the farmer. He thought about how the man had found peace in a task that seemed difficult, even unpleasant. He thought about how that peace had nothing to do with the conditions around him, and everything to do with his attitude toward them. He realized that the path to enlightenment was not a straight line, free of obstacles. It was a winding path, sometimes muddy, sometimes steep, sometimes rainy. And the only way to walk it was to embrace it, to feel the mud, to climb the steep parts, to let the rain fall on your face. As he drifted off to sleep, the disciple smiled. Tomorrow would be a wet day, a messy day, a day of hard work. And for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to it not in the days that followed. The disciple worked in the rice paddy alongside the farmer. He learned to plant seedlings with a gentle touch, to let his feet sink into the mud without resistance, to feel the rain as a gift rather than a burden. He learned that when he stopped fighting, the work became easier. When he stopped worrying about getting wet or dirty, he could focus on the task at hand, on the rhythm of his body, on the life he was helping to create. He also learned that flow is not always easy. There were moments when he grew frustrated, when he wanted to rush, when he wanted to quit. But each time, he thought of the farmer, of the river, of the wisdom of working with what is. And each time, he found his center again, his peace again. By the end of the week, the disciple's robes were stained with mud, his hands calloused, his body tired. But his mind was clear, his heart light. He had learned more about flow in those few days than he had in years of studying texts or sitting in meditation. He had learned that enlightenment is not a destination, but a way of moving through the world with openness, with acceptance, with grace. As he and the Zen master prepared to leave the village, the disciple looked back at the rice paddy. Seedlings stood tall and green, their roots deep in the mud, their leaves reaching toward the sun. They had weathered the rain, and now they were thriving, just like us, the Zen master said, following his gaze. The disciple nodded. "Just like us," he repeated. And as they walked away, the disciple felt the earth beneath his feet, the sun on his face, the wind in his hair. He felt alive, present, connected to everything around him. He knew that the journey ahead would have its share of rain and mud, of obstacles and challenges. But he also knew that he had the strength to face them, not by fighting, but by flowing, by adapting, by trusting in the process of life, just as the farmer trusted in the process of growth. The afternoon sun slanted through the lattice windows of the temple, casting diamond-shaped patterns on the polished wooden floor. A young woman knelt before a vanity, her fingers brushing the edge of a bronze mirror. The mirror was old, its surface slightly clouded, but it still caught the light, reflecting her face back at her eyes wide with longing, lips pressed into a thin line. Beside her, a vase of peonies stood, their petals soft and pink, their fragrance filling the small room like a sigh. Her name was Myling, and she had come to the temple seeking solace. Not from grief or anger, but from a quieter pain, a sense that the world she saw was slipping through her fingers like water. For weeks, she had been captivated by the reflection of the peonies in the mirror. There was something about it, something more vivid, more perfect, than the flowers themselves. The mirror's image did not wilt. It did not fade. It stayed bright and whole, even as the real petals began to droop. "Master," she called, her voice soft, as if afraid to disturb the stillness. A moment later, the door slid open, and the temple's abbess stepped inside. The abbess was an older woman, her hair streaked with gray, her face calm as a moonlit lake. She carried a small tray with a teapot and 2 cups, and she set it down gently on a low table before taking a seat across from Myling. "You have been sitting here for a long time," the abbess said, pouring tea into the cups. Steam curled upward, blurring the mirror's edge for a moment. "What holds your attention so strongly?" Myling gestured to the mirror. "The flowers," she said. "Look how beautiful they are. They never change. They never die." The abbess glanced at the mirror, then at the real peonies. "And the ones in the vase?" she asked. Myling frowned. "They are lovely, but they will not last. In a few days, they will be brown and crumpled. But the ones in the mirror, they are perfect forever." The abbess sipped her tea, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you think the mirror's flowers are real, Myling?" "Of course not," Myling said, though there was a hesitation in her voice. "But they feel real. When I look at them, I forget that they are just a reflection. I feel happy, like I have found something that cannot be taken away." The abbess nodded slowly. "And what happens when you turn away from the mirror?" "Then they are gone," Myling admitted. "But that is why I stay. I do not want them to disappear." The abbess set down her teacup, her movements deliberate. "Let me tell you a story," she said. "Many years ago, when I was young, I traveled to a mountain lake with my teacher. The lake was clear like glass, and when the moon rose, its reflection was so bright it seemed to light up the water. My teacher pointed to it and said, 'Reach out and touch the moon.'" Myling smiled. "But that is impossible. The moon in the lake is not real. You cannot touch it." "Exactly," the abbess said. "But I did not understand that then. I knelt by the water, stretching my hand toward the reflection, trying to grasp it. The more I reached, the more the water rippled, shattering the image. The more it shattered, the more frustrated I became. By the time my teacher pulled me back, I was crying. 'Why can I not have it?' I asked. 'It is so beautiful.'" "What did your teacher say?" Myling asked, leaning forward slightly. She said, "The moon in the lake is not the moon. It is a shadow, a trick of light and water. To crave it is to crave a dream. The real moon is in the sky, where everyone can see it, where its light can warm you, where its phases remind you of the beauty of change." Myling looked back at the mirror, her fingers hovering over its surface. "But the real flowers will die," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes," the abbess said, "and that is their beauty. They bloom, they fade, they make room for new flowers. They do not cling to life or to perfection. They simply are, in each moment as they are." Myling thought of this. She thought of how she had spent hours staring at the mirror, trying to hold on to something that was not even there. She thought of how she had neglected the real peonies, had not watered them, had not smelled them, had not really seen them, because they were not perfect enough. She thought of other areas of her life, too, how she had chased after moments that had already passed, how she had clung to memories as if they were more real than the present, how she had feared the future because it might not live up to her expectations. "I am like the girl trying to touch the moon in the lake," she said finally. The abbess smiled. "We all are, at times. We see a reflection of what we desire, a perfect moment, a perfect love, a perfect life, and we forget that it is just a reflection. We reach for it, and when we cannot grasp it, we grow sad or angry, or empty. But the truth is, the reflection is not the thing itself. It is a shadow, a echo, a dream. Myling picked up one of the real peonies, its petals soft against her palm. She breathed in its scent, sweet and earthy, and noticed how the light caught its edges, turning them golden. "It is not perfect," she said. "There is a small brown spot on one of the petals. Does that make it less beautiful?" The abbess asked. "No," Myling said, surprised by the truth of the words. "It makes it more real. Like it has a story." The abbess nodded. "All things that are real have stories, Myling. They have scars and flaws and moments of imperfection. That is what makes them alive. The reflection in the mirror has no story. It has no scars. It has no life. It is just an image frozen in time." Myling set the peony back in the vase, then turned to the mirror. For a moment, she looked at the reflected flowers, but they seemed different, now flat, lifeless, somehow empty. The real peonies, with their slight flaws and their fleeting beauty, felt more precious, more alive. "Why do we do this?" she asked. "Why do we chase after shadows instead of embracing what is real?" "Because the real world is messy," the abbess said. "It is unpredictable. It hurts sometimes. The shadow world dreams, memories, reflections can be controlled. We can edit them, make them perfect, hold on to them forever. But they are not real. And in chasing them, we miss the life that is happening right in front of us." Myling thought of her childhood, how she had loved to chase fireflies at dusk. She would run through the grass, her hands outstretched, trying to catch the tiny lights. But the more she chased, the more they darted away. It was only when she stopped, when she stood still and quiet, that they would land on her hand, their light warm and fragile. "Like the fireflies," she said. "You cannot catch them if you are too busy chasing." "Exactly," the abbess sighed. "Life is like that. It is not something to be caught or controlled or made perfect. It is something to be experienced, to be felt in all its messiness and beauty." Over the next few days, Myling stayed at the temple, helping with the daily chores. She watered the garden, and instead of focusing on the flowers that were wilting, she noticed the new buds that were just beginning to open. She helped prepare meals, and instead of worrying about whether the rice was cooked perfectly, she enjoyed the smell of it simmering, the sound of the other nuns laughing as they worked. She sat in meditation, and instead of trying to make her mind go blank, she let her thoughts come and go, like clouds passing through the sky. One evening, as the sun was setting, Myling walked to the temple's garden. The peonies in her room had finally wilted, and she had thrown them away that morning. But as she rounded a corner, she saw a new patch of flowers, lotus blossoms, their pink petals unfurling in the fading light. She knelt down beside them, breathing in their fragrance, and for a moment, she thought about taking one back to her room, placing it in the vase, watching its reflection in the mirror. But then she shook her head. Instead, she just sat there, watching the lotus flowers as the light faded, as the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. She did not try to hold on to them. She did not try to make them last longer. She just let herself be with them in that moment, knowing that they would not be there forever. And that was okay. When she returned to her room that night, she took the mirror and turned it face down on the vanity. It was not that she never wanted to look at it again, but that she no longer needed it. She no longer needed the comfort of a perfect reflection. She was learning to find beauty in the imperfection of the real world, in the fleeting moments that could not be captured or held onto. The next morning, the abbess found Myling in the garden, watering the lotus flowers. A young woman looked up, and there was a light in her eyes that had not been there before, a light that came not from chasing shadows, but from embracing the light of the present moment. "You seem different," the abbess said. Myling smiled. "I think I am," she said. "I feel lighter, like I have been carrying a heavy stone, and now it is gone. The stone of wanting things to be other than they are, the abbess said. Yes, Meiling said. It is a very heavy stone. They stood together for a while, watching the lotus flowers sway in the gentle breeze. A butterfly landed on one of the petals, its wings opening and closing slowly, as if savoring the moment. Look, Meiling said softly. It is perfect, but she did not reach for it. She did not try to capture it. She just watched and smiled and let it be. And in that moment, she understood. The perfect is not something to be held onto. It is something to be, experienced, to be cherished, and then to be let go so that new perfect moments can take their place. It is in the blooming and the fading, the coming and the going, that life finds its true beauty. As the days turned into weeks, Meiling continued to grow and change. She learned to greet each day with an open heart, to embrace its joys and its sorrows without clinging to either. She learned that happiness is not found in perfect reflections, but in the messy, wonderful, fleeting reality of life. When she finally left the temple to return home, she took nothing with her but a small lotus seed, which she planted in a pot. By her window, she watched it grow, day by day, first a tiny green shoot, then leaves, then, after many weeks, a single blossom. When it wilted, she did not grieve. She simply saved its seeds, knowing that new flowers would come. And sometimes, late at night, she would think of the mirror in the temple, face down on the vanity. She would think of the reflection of the peonies, and how she had once thought them perfect. But then she would look out at the moon, bright in the sky, or at the stars twinkling above, and she would smile, for she knew now that the real beauty is not in the reflection, but in the thing itself, in the moon, in the stars, in the flowers, in the moments that make up a life. And that beauty, though fleeting, is always there, waiting to be seen, if only we have the courage to look away from the mirror and into the world. The evening bell began to toll just as the sun dipped below the western mountains, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. The sound rolled through the temple grounds, deep and resonant like a giant heartbeat. It echoed off the stone walls, tangled in the branches of the pine trees, drifted over the rice paddies where farmers were finishing their work for the day. In the main courtyard, a young monk named Kenji stood still, his head tilted slightly, listening. He was new to the temple, having arrived only a month before, and everything still felt fresh and mysterious, especially the bell. There was something about its sound that seemed to reach into the very core of him, quieting his thoughts, steadying his breath. But it also confused him. When the last note faded into the evening air, leaving a soft hum in its wake, Kenji turned to find his teacher, Master Tanaka, walking toward him. The old monk carried a lantern, its light flickering gently, casting warm pools on the stone path. Master, Kenji said, bowing slightly, may I ask you something? Master Tanaka nodded, his eyes crinkling with kindness. Of course, Kenji. What is on your mind? The bell, Kenji said. When does it begin? And when does it end? Master Tanaka raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Well, Kenji said, gesturing toward the bell tower, which stood at the far end of the courtyard. The bell ringer pulls the rope, and the bell starts to ring. That's the beginning. Then he stops pulling, and the bell stops ringing. That's the end, but it doesn't feel that way. The sound seems to linger, like it's still there, even after you can't hear it anymore. And before it starts, there's this anticipation, like the sound is already waiting, just out of reach. Master Tanaka smiled. You have a good ear, Kenji. Sit with me. He led the way to a stone bench beneath a large maple tree, its leaves just starting to turn red at the edges. He set the lantern down between them, and the light played over their faces as they settled onto the bench. Tell me, Master Tanaka said, when you clap your hands, Where does the sound come from? Kenji shrugged. From my hands, of course, when they meet. Then where does it go when it fades? Kenji thought for a moment. It disappears into the air. Does it truly disappear? Master Tanaka asked. Or does it become part of the air? Part of the silence that comes after? Kenji frowned. I'm not sure, it just stops. Master Tanaka picked up a small stone from the ground and tossed it into the nearby pond. It made a soft plunk. As it hit the water, and ripples spread outward, growing larger and fainter until they vanished. Where did the ripples go? Master Tanaka asked. They became part of the water, Kenji said, understanding dawning. They didn't disappear. They merged back into the pond. Exactly, Master Tanaka said. And so it is with sound. The bell does not simply start and stop. It is part of a cycle. Before the bell ringer pulls the rope, the sound is already present in the metal of the bell, in the air around it, in the intention of the ringer. When he pulls, the sound is released, like a bird taking flight. It travels, it echoes, it changes. And when it fades, it does not vanish. It returns to the silence, just as the ripples return to the pond. It becomes part of the silence, waiting to be released again. Kenji thought about this, staring at the bell tower in the distance. So there is no beginning or end to the sound of the bell? He asked. Not in the way you think, Master Tanaka said. The beginning and end are just points we mark to make sense of things. But in reality, everything is connected. The sound of the bell is in the silence that comes before it, and the silence is in the sound. They are two sides of the same coin. Kenji thought of his meditation practice. He often struggled with the idea of empty mind, thinking that he needed to clear his thoughts completely to reach a state of nothingness. But maybe that was not the case. Maybe the thoughts were like the sound of the bell. They arose, they lingered, they faded back into the silence of his mind, but they were never truly separate from it. Maybe the silence was not the absence of thoughts, but the space in which they existed. Let me ask you another question, Master Tanaka said. When you listen to the bell, what do you hear? Kenji closed his eyes, recalling the sound. I hear the bell, deep, resonant like I said before. Is that all? Kenji hesitated. Well, sometimes I hear the wind, too, mixing with the sound. And the birds stopping their songs for a moment, then starting again. And my own breath, matching the rhythm of the tolls. Ah, Master Tanaka said. So the sound of the bell is not just the bell. It is the bell and the wind and the thea, birds and your breath. It is everything around it, everything that shapes it, everything that listens to it. A sound is never alone, Kenji. It is part of the world, part of the moment. To hear the bell truly, you must hear not just the sound, but the silence around it, the air it travels through, the ears that receive it. Kenji opened his eyes, looking around at the evening world, the darkening sky, the lantern's glow, the distant hoot of an owl. He felt a sense of connection he had not felt before, as if he were part of something larger, something that included the bell, the silence, the wind, the owl, everything. Last night, Kenji said, I lay awake, listening to the crickets. They chirped and chirped, and then suddenly they stopped. For a moment, the silence was so loud it hurt. And then they started again. It was like the silence was speaking, just as much as the crickets were. Master Tanaka nodded. Silence is not empty, Kenji. It is full of possibility, full of memory, full of all the sounds that have ever been and ever will be. The bell teaches us this. It reminds us that sound and silence are not opposites. They are partners dancing together, each giving meaning to the other. Over the next few days, Kenji paid close attention to the bell. He listened when it tolled at dawn, its sound sharp and clear, cutting through the mist. He listened at midday, when it echoed off the hot stones, feeling almost lazy in the warmth. He listened at evening, when it seemed to wrap around the temple, like a blanket, soft and comforting. Each time, he tried to hear not just the sound, but the silence that surrounded it. He tried to feel the way the sound grew out of the silence, like a flower blooming, and then returned to it, like a leaf falling. He began to notice how the bell's sound changed, depending on the weather, thinner on windy days, fuller on still ones. How it sounded different from different parts of the temple, louder near the tower, softer in the garden, muffled in the library. He also began to notice the same pattern in his own mind. Thoughts arose, like the sound of the bell, and then faded back into silence. They were not enemies to be fought, or strangers to be feared. They were part of him, part of his mind, part of the endless dance between sound and silence, activity and stillness. One morning, as the bell tolled for dawn, Kenji was in the garden, raking leaves. He stopped for a moment, leaning on his rake, and closed his eyes. He let the sound wash over him, feeling it in his bones, in his breath, in the very ground beneath his feet. When the last note faded, he did not rush back to work. He stood there, listening to the silence that followed, the silence that was not silence at all, but 1,000 other sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of a wren, the distant cough of an old monk, the beating of his own heart. And in that moment, he understood. The bell did not start or stop. It was always there, in the same way that the sun is always there, even when it is hidden by clouds. It was in the metal, in the air, in the listening. It was in the silence before and the silence after. It was in him. When he returned to his room later that morning, he found Master Tanaka sitting on his meditation cushion, waiting for him. "You look different," Master Tanaka said, smiling. Kenji bowed. "I think I do, Master. I think I finally hear the bell." Master Tanaka nodded. "And what does it say to you?" "It says that everything is connected," Kenji said. "That there is no beginning or end, only this moment and the endless flow of life through it. It says that silence is not the absence of sound, but the whole of it. It says that I am part of all of it, the bell, the silence, the world, the moment." Master Tanaka's smile widened. "Good. Remember that, Kenji. When you are confused, when you are lost, when you are caught up in thoughts of past or future, listen for the bell, not with your ears, but with your heart. It will remind you that you are here, now, part of the great song of life, which has no beginning and no end, only the beautiful, endless middle." Kenji thought of the bell, tolling through the ages, calling monks to prayer, waking the sleeping, marking the passage of time. He thought of all the monks who had listened to it before him, and all who would listen after. He thought of how the sound would travel, beyond the temple walls, beyond the village, into the mountains and the valleys, fading but never truly disappearing, becoming part of the world, part of the silence, part of the next sound, and the next thought, and in that thought, he found a deep, abiding peace, a peace that was not the absence of noise, but the presence of understanding, a peace that, like the sound of the bell, would linger long after the moment had passed. The autumn wind carried a crispness that bit at the cheeks, but in the small grove behind the temple, it felt more like a caress. Golden leaves spiraled down from the maple trees, carpeting the ground in a mosaic of amber and crimson. An old man sat on a weathered wooden bench, his back straight despite his years, his eyes fixed on the slow dance of the falling leaves. His name was Takeshi, a former monk who had lived in the temple for over half a century before retiring to a small cottage nearby. Beside him, a young disciple named Yuki huddled in her woolen robe, watching the leaves with a mixture of fascination and sadness. "Every year, I mourn them," Yuki said, her voice soft. "They're so beautiful in summer green and full, sheltering us from the sun. and then they die. She reached out to catch a leaf as it drifted past, its edges curled and brittle. It seemed so unfair. Takeshi smiled, his eyes crinkling like dried riverbeds. Do you think they die, little one? He asked, his voice warm with the weight of years. Yuki nodded, turning the leaf over in her hand. They turn brown. They fall. They crumble into dust. What else would you call it? Takeshi pointed to a patch of earth at the base of a maple tree, where a thick layer of leaves had accumulated over the years. Dig your fingers into that soil, he said. Yuki hesitated, then knelt down and brushed aside the top layer of fresh leaves. Beneath them, the soil was dark and rich, dotted with fragments of decomposed leaves, soft and crumbly. She ran her fingers through it, feeling its dampness, its life. What do you feel? Takeshi asked. Earth, Yuki said. Warm, soft. It smells alive. Indeed, Takeshi said. That earth is made of leaves, Yuki. Leaves that fell last year and the year before, and 100 years before that. They did not die. They returned to the soil, to the tree, to the cycle. Yuki frowned, sitting back on her heels. But this leaf in my hand, she held up the crumpled maple leaf, it will never be green again. It will never grow on. The tree. How is that a return? Takeshi leaned forward, his eyes bright. Tell me, where do you think the leaves come from in spring? From the tree, Yuki said, confused. It grows new ones. And where does the tree get the strength? To grow them? Yuki thought for a moment. From the sun? The rain? From the earth, Takeshi said, tapping the ground with his cane. From the nutrients in the soil. Nutrients that come from what? From the leaves, Yuki said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. From the leaves that fell and decomposed. Exactly, Takeshi said. The tree gives birth to the leaves in spring. The leaves feed the tree in autumn, when they fall and return to the soil. It is a circle, Yuki, not an end, a circle. He picked up a leaf from the bench beside him and held it up to the light. The sun shone through its translucent edges, turning it into a stained glass window. This leaf is not ending its journey, Yuki. It is completing it. It is going home. Back to the tree that gave it life. Back to the earth that nourished the thee. Tree, back to the beginning, so that new leaves may be born. Yuki thought of the cherry blossoms that fell in spring, their petals carpeting the ground like snow. She had mourned them too, their beauty so fleeting. But in summer, the trees bore fruit-juicy cherries that stained her fingers red. She thought of the rice that was harvested in autumn, its stalks cut down and left to rot in the fields, only to enrich the soil for next year's crop. She thought of her own grandmother, who had died the year before, and how her family had buried her beneath her favorite plum tree. This spring, that tree had bloomed more vibrantly than ever. I never thought of it that way, Yuki said, her voice quiet. I always saw it as a loss, but it's a gift. The leaf is giving itself back to the tree. Takeshi nodded. That is the way of all things. We come from the earth, Yuki. We live, we grow, we bloom, and then when our time comes, we return to the earth, not as an end, but as a part of the cycle, to nourish what comes next, to become part of the new life that springs from the old. He stood up slowly, leaning on his cane, and walked over to the maple tree. He placed his palm against its trunk, feeling its rough bark, its slow, steady pulse. This tree is old, he said. Older than I am. Older than my father was. But it is not the same tree it was 50 years ago. Its roots have grown deeper. Its branches have spread wider. It has shed thousands of leaves and grown thousands more. It has weathered storms, droughts, fires. It has changed, but it has always been true to its nature to grow, to give, to return. Yuki stood beside him, pressing her hand against the tree. She could feel its solidity, its quiet strength. It felt like a living thing. Yes, but more than that, it felt like a bridge, connecting the past and the future, the earth and the sky, the falling leaves and the new buds waiting to burst in spring. Who am I then? Yuki asked, her voice barely audible. If I am part of this cycle, if I come from the earth and return to it, what is it that makes me me? Takeshi turned to her, his eyes soft. You are the leaf, Yuki, and you are the tree. You are the soil and the sun and the rain. You are the past, in the form of your parents and their parents, and all who came before. You are the present, in this moment, standing here, asking these questions. You are the future, in the way you will touch the lives of others, in the memories you will leave behind, in the love that will outlive you. He paused, then added, but most of all, you are you, a unique expression of the same life force. It animates the tree, the leaves, the soil, a unique thread in the great tapestry of being. You do not need to fear the end of your thread, because the tapestry will continue, and your thread will be part of it forever. Yuki thought of her grandmother again, her laugh, the way she told stories, the way she had held Yuki's hand. When she was scared, her grandmother's body was gone, but her spirit, her love, her stories, they were still here, in Yuki, in her family, in the plum tree that bloomed so beautifully. She had returned, not as a ghost, but as a living presence, woven into the fabric of their lives. Last night, I dreamed of my grandmother, Yuki said. She was sitting under the plum tree, smiling at me. I wanted to stay with her, but she told me I had to go back. She said, I'm not gone. I'm just closer to the roots. I didn't understand what she meant then, but now, Takeshi placed a hand on Yuki's shoulder. She was speaking the truth. The roots are where we are all connected, Yuki, where the past and present meet, where the leaf returns to the tree, where we remember who we are and where we come from. As the afternoon wore on, the wind died down, and the leaves fell more slowly, as if savoring their final moments in the sun. Yuki and Takeshi sat together on the bench, watching them, saying little. There was no need for words. The leaves were teaching the lesson in their slow, graceful descent. In their quiet return to the earth.yuk, I picked up another leaf, but this time she did not see its fragility. She saw its beauty, its purpose, its place in the great cycle. She pressed it gently into the soil at the base of the tree, as if returning it to where it belonged. Thank you, she whispered, to the leaf, to the tree, to the earth, to her grandmother. Thank you for showing me the way home. Takeshi smiled, watching her. He had spent a lifetime learning this lesson, and he knew that Yuki was just beginning to understand it. But that was the way of things. The lesson was passed from leaf to soil, from tree to child, from old to young, in an unbroken chain that stretched back to the beginning of time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they walked back to the temple, their footsteps crunching on the carpet of leaves. Yuki felt lighter, as if a weight she had been carrying for years had been lifted. She no longer feared the falling leaves, or the passing of time, or the inevitability of her own return to the earth. She understood now that it was all part of the dance, the beautiful, endless dance of life, death, and rebirth. And as she walked, she thought she could hear the earth breathing, deep and steady, as if welcoming the leaves home, as if welcoming her home. The sun hung high in the sky, a blazing orb that turned the desert landscape into a shimmering sea of heat. The sand burned beneath the traveler's boots, and the air was so dry, it felt like it was sucking the moisture from his very bones. His canteen had been empty for hours, and his throat was raw, as if lined with sandpaper. He had been walking for days, following rumors of a spring hidden somewhere in these hills, but all he had found was more desert, more rock, more endless sky. His name was Arjun, a merchant from a distant city who had taken a wrong turn on his way to a trade fair. Now he was lost, dehydrated, and growing desperate. Every step felt like a struggle, his legs heavy as lead, his mind foggy with thirst. He thought he saw water once, a glistening pool in the distance, but when he stumbled toward it, it vanished. A mirage that mocked his suffering. Just when he was about to collapse, he saw something a shadow, dark against the sun-baked rock. As he drew closer, he realized it was a small cave, its entrance shaded by a gnarled juniper tree. And beside the cave, sitting cross-legged on a flat stone, was an old man. He wore simple robes, his skin weathered by the sun and wind, but his eyes were clear and calm, like deep pools of water. "Please," Arjun croaked, falling to his knees in front of the man. "Water? Do you have any water?" The old man nodded, gesturing to a clay jug beside him. Arjun lunged for it, uncorking it and bringing it to his lips. But before he could drink, the old man spoke. Slowly, he said, his voice like the rustle of dry grass. "Drink too fast, and you'll make yourself sick." Arjun hesitated, then took a small sip. The water was cool, refreshing, sliding down his throat like a blessing. He took another sip, then another, savoring it, feeling it spread through his body, reviving him. "Thank you," he said, after he had drunk his fill. "You have no idea how long I've been searching for water." The old man smiled. "I think I do," he said. "This dessert has a way of making you feel every drop you lack." Arjun sat down on the ground, leaning against the cool stone of the cave. "I've been looking for a spring," he said. "People in the last village told me there was one somewhere in these hills, but I can't find it. I've searched everywhere." The old man nodded. "It is here," he said. "Not far from here, in fact, but it is not easy to find, especially if you are in a hurry." Arjun perked up. "Please, tell me where it is. I'll pay you. I have coins, jewels." The old man held up a hand, silencing him. "I need no payment, but I will show you the spring, on one condition." "Anything," Arjun said. "You must wait," the old man said. "Until sunset, and I will take you there." Arjun stared at him, disbelief washing over him. "Wait? But I'm so close. Why wait? What if I die of thirst before sunset?" "You won't," the old man said, matter of fact. "You've had water, and there is more in the jug. You'll survive until sunset. But if you rush off now, you'll miss the spring again. I promise you that." Arjun was confused, angry even. Why would this man make him wait? What was the point? But there was something in the old man's eyes, something calm, something wise that made Arjun hesitate. He had been rushing for days, and where had it gotten him? Lost, thirsty, desperate. Maybe waiting was not such a bad idea. "Very well," he said grudgingly. "I'll wait." The old man nodded, then closed his eyes, as if settling into a meditative state. Arjun sat beside him, fidgeting, his mind racing. He thought about all the things he should be doing, meeting with his trading partners, closing deals, counting his profits. He thought about how much time he was wasting, sitting here in the middle of nowhere, waiting for a man to show him a spring he could probably find on his own. But as the hours passed, something strange happened. The initial anger faded, replaced by a kind of resignation. He began to notice things, the way the light changed on the rocks, turning them from red to gold as the sun moved across the sky. The sound of a lizard scurrying across the sand. The gentle rustle of the juniper tree in the breeze. He had been so focused on finding water, on reaching his destination, that he had forgotten to notice the world around him. "Tell me," Arjun said, breaking the silence, "why do you live here, in this harsh place?" The old man opened his eyes. "It is not harsh," he said. "It is what it is. Hot in the day, cold at night, dry mostly, but there is beauty here. The stars are brighter than anywhere else. The rocks hold stories if you listen. And the spring, when you find it, it is all the more precious because it is not easy to come by." Arjun thought about this. He was used to the comforts of the city, running water, shade, plenty of food and drink. He had always thought of places like this as barren, useless. But now, as he looked at the way the sunlight played on the rocks, he saw a kind of beauty in their starkness, in their resilience. "Is that why you make me wait?" he asked. "To teach me to appreciate the water more?" "Partly," the old man said, "but also because the spring is not always easy to. See, it is hidden beneath a layer of stone. You have to know where to look, and you have to be patient enough to wait for the water to reveal itself." Arjun frowned. "What do you mean, wait for the water to reveal itself?" "You'll see," the old man said, smiling as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple. The old man stood up. "Come," he said, "it is time." He led Arjun along a narrow path that wound around the side of the hill. The air was growing cooler now, and a gentle breeze had picked up, carrying the scent of sage. Arjun's legs still ached, but he felt lighter somehow, more alert. After walking for about 10 minutes, they reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large, flat rock, its surface smooth and polished by time and water. "This is it?" Arjun asked, disappointment creeping into his voice. "A rock?" The old man nodded. "This is it." Arjun stared at him. "But there's no water here. Just a rock. Be patient," the old man said. He sat down cross-legged in front of the rock and gestured for Arjun to do the same. They sat in silence. As the sun set and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, the air grew colder, and Arjun pulled his cloak tighter around him. He was beginning to think the old man was playing a trick on him, that there was no spring at all, when he heard a sound, a faint, dripping sound, like water falling into a pool. He looked at the rock, but he still saw nothing. Then, as his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he noticed something, a small crack in the surface of the rock near its base. And from that crack, a single drop of water was falling slowly, steadily, into a small depression in the ground below, where a pool of water was beginning to form. "It's dripping," Arjun said, surprised. "But that's just a trickle. Hardly a spring." "Watch," the old man said. They sat and watched as the minutes passed. The drip became a trickle. The trickle became a stream, as more and more water began to seep from the crack in the rock. The pool grew larger until it was big enough to dip a hand into. "Why now?" Arjun asked, amazed. "Why does it flow now and not before?" "The spring is fed by snowmelt from the mountains," the old man explained. "It takes time for the water to travel through the rock, through the earth. During the heat of the day, the rock expands, closing the cracks, slowing the flow. But as the air cools in the evening, the rock contracts and the water can flow freely. If you had come here in the middle of the day, you would have seen nothing but a dry rock. You would have thought I lied. But by waiting, by being patient, you have seen the spring reveal itself." Arjun knelt down and dipped his hand into the pool. The water was cold, clear, refreshing. He cupped his hands and drank, savoring it more than he had the water from the jug. This water felt like a gift, hard-earned, precious. "I see now," he said, after he had drunk his fill. "It's not just about finding the spring. It's about learning to wait for it, to trust that it is there, even when you can't see it." The old man nodded. Life is like this spring, Arjun. So much of what we seek, happiness, peace, understanding, does not come when we rush, when we demand it, when we force it. It comes when we are patient, when we trust, when we allow things to unfold in their own time. Arjun thought about his life as a merchant, always rushing, always striving, always looking for the next deal, the next profit. He had thought that success was about speed, about seizing opportunities, about never waiting. But here, in the middle of the desert, he was learning that sometimes waiting was the most powerful thing you could do. "I've been in such a hurry my whole life," Arjun said, his voice quiet. "I've missed so much. The way the sun sets, the sound of the wind, the simple pleasure of a cool drink of water. I've been so focused on the destination that I've forgotten to live the journey." The old man smiled. "It is never too late to slow down, Arjun, to notice, to wait. The spring will always be here, but it will only reveal itself to those who have the patience to sit and watch." They stayed at the spring for a while longer, drinking water, watching the stars come out in full force, their light bright and clear in the desert sky. When Arjun finally stood up to leave, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He still needed to find his way back to the city, to meet his trading partners, to take care of his business. But he knew that things would be different now. He would not rush. He would not force. He would trust that the path would reveal itself in its own time, in its own way. "Thank you," Arjun said, bowing to the old man. "You have given me more than water. You have given me a new way to see the world." The old man nodded. "Remember the spring, Arjun. When you are tempted to rush, when you are frustrated by delay, when you can't see the path ahead, remember that some things can only be found by waiting." Arjun nodded, then turned and began to walk, his steps slower, more deliberate than before. He did not know exactly where he was going, but for the first time in a long time, he did not care. He was content to walk, to notice, to wait. And somewhere, deep inside, he knew that he would find his way out as he disappeared into the darkness. The old man sat alone beside the spring, listening to the water flow, watching the stars. He smiled, knowing that the desert had taught another traveler its most precious lesson, that patience was not passivity, but trust. Trust in the flow of life. Trust in the timing of the universe. Trust that even in the driest, most barren places, there was always water, always life, always hope for those who were willing to wait. The market square was a riot of color and sound. Vendors shouted out their wares, fresh vegetables, hand-woven cloth, pottery, spices, their voices mixing with the clatter of wooden carts, the neighing of horses, and the laughter of children, chasing each other through the crowd. In the middle of it all, a monk sat cross-legged on a warm straw mat, his presence as calm as a still lake in the midst of a storm. He was not like the other monks in the village. For one thing, he wore a tattered robe that looked like it had been patched 100 times in a dozen different colors. For another, he carried a large, bulging cloth bag slung over his shoulder, a bag that seemed to hold an impossible number of things: a wooden bowl, a length of rope, a few coins, a child's doll, a handful of dried flowers, even a small stone that sparkled in the sunlight. People called him the cloth bag monk, and no one knew his real name or where he had come from. They only knew that he appeared in the market square every morning, sitting quietly, smiling gently, and collecting things, bits and pieces that others had discarded or forgotten. A young woman named Lila stood at the edge of the crowd, watching him. She was new to the village, having moved there with her husband after their home had been destroyed in a flood. She carried a heavy heart, filled with anger and grief over the loss of their belongings, their memories, their sense of security. Every time she looked at her empty hands, at the few rags they had managed to save, She felt a sharp pain in her chest, as if something vital had been torn away. What is he doing? She asked a nearby vendor, a woman selling fresh bread. Why does he collect all that junk? The vendor laughed, wiping her hands on her apron. That's the cloth bag monk. He takes what no one else wants. Says it's all useful in its own way. Useful? Lila scoffed. A broken doll? A stone? What use could those possibly be? The vendor shrugged. Beats me. But he's a kind soul, that one. Once, my son lost his favorite ball, and the monk pulled one just like it out of that bag of his. Said he'd found it in the mud by the river. Another time, old Mrs. Tanaka needed a needle to mend her grandson's coat, and he had one. Just pulled it out, like it was nothing. Leela frowned. It seemed impossible. That bag couldn't possibly hold all those things. And even if it could, why would anyone want to carry around such worthless trinkets? As if sensing her curiosity, the cloth bag monk looked up and smiled at her. It was a warm, open smile, like sunlight breaking through clouds. He patted the ground beside him, gesturing for her to sit. Lila hesitated, then found herself walking. Over. She sat down, crossing her legs awkwardly, unsure of what to say. You seem troubled, the monk said, his voice soft and melodic, like wind chimes. Lila nodded, her throat tightening. I lost everything in the flood, she said. Our home, our things, even the locket my mother gave me. It was all so precious. And now it's gone. I feel like a part of me is missing. The monk nodded, his smile fading slightly, but his eyes still kind. Loss is a heavy burden, he said. It makes the heart feel small, doesn't it? Like a closed fist, unable to hold anything new. Layla thought about that. Yes, that was exactly how she felt, like her heart had shut itself off, afraid to let anything else in, afraid to be hurt again. The monk reached into his cloth bag and pulled out a small, cracked cup. Look at this, he said, holding it up. Lila looked. It was a cheap earthenware cup, its rim chipped, a large crack running down one side. It's broken, she said. And the monk asked. He filled it with water from a nearby jug. And though the water seeped out through the crack, it still held some. It can still hold water, even if not as much as before. It can still serve a purpose. He set the cup down and pulled out a rusty nail. And this? It's rusted, Lila said. Useless. The monk picked up a piece of string from his bag and tied it to the nail, then hung it from a nearby tree branch where it caught the wind and spun gently. Now it's a wind chime, he said. Not as beautiful as a silver one, perhaps, but it still makes music. Leela watched the nail spin, listening to the faint clink as it hit the branch. It was a simple sound, but there was a kind of beauty in it, in its imperfection. The monk reached into his bag again, pulling out a handful of mismatched buttons, a torn piece of fabric, and a length of thread. He began to sew the buttons onto the fabric, creating a pattern that was chaotic, yet somehow pleasing to the eye. What are you doing? Lila asked. Making something new, the monk said, from things that others threw away. See, they are not useless. They are just waiting to be given a new purpose. Lila thought about her locket, the one with her mother's picture inside. It had been beautiful, yes, but its beauty had been in the memory it held, not in the metal itself. That memory was still with her, wasn't it? In her mind, in her heart. The locket was gone, but the love it represented was still there. I don't understand, she said. How can you carry all these things around? Don't they weigh you down? The monk laughed, a warm, hearty sound that seemed to fill the square. This bag is heavy, he said, patting it, but my heart is light because I do not cling to these things. I do not think of them as mine. I hold them loosely so that when someone needs them, I can give them away. They are not a burden because I do not attach myself to them." He looked at her, his eyes wise and gentle. "It is not the things themselves that weigh us down, Lila. It is our attachment to them. It is the thought that they define us, that we cannot be happy without them, that their loss is a part of our own loss." Lila thought of all the things she had lost: the locket, her mother's quilt, the rocking chair her husband had made for their first child, who had died before he was born. She had thought of them as extensions of herself, as proof that she had a history, a home, a life. Now that they were gone, she felt adrift, as if she had no identity. "But how do you let go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How do you stop clinging?" The monk held up his bag. "This bag is like the heart," he said. "If it is closed, it can hold nothing. If it is small, it can hold only a few things. But if it is open, if it is large, it can hold much. It can hold loss and grief and sadness, but also joy and love and new beginnings. The trick is not to let the bag become too full, not to let the things inside harden into Jinnian attachment, to hold them lightly so that there is always room for more." He put the buttons and fabric back into his bag, then pulled out a small smooth stone and handed it to Lila. "Here," he said. Lila took it, feeling its coolness in her palm. It was a simple stone, no different from 100 others she had seen, but there was something comforting about its weight, its solidity. "What is this for?" she asked. "To remind you that even the smallest things can have meaning," the monk said. "Not because they are valuable or rare or beautiful, but because you choose to see meaning in them. Your locket was meaningful because of the love it represented, not because of the metal. That love is still with you. It is in your heart, which is larger than any locket, any bag, anything." Leela closed her fingers around the stone, feeling its warmth as her body heat seeped into it. She thought of her mother, of her smile, of the way she had hummed when she cooked. Those memories were not in the locket. They were in her. She thought of her husband, of his kindness, of the way he had held her when the floodwaters rose, telling her everything would be all right. He was still with her, his love still strong, even if their home was gone. "I think I see," she said, her voice quiet. "My heart has been like a closed bag, filled with grief and anger, with memories of what I'd lost. I haven't made room for anything new. I haven't let myself see that there is still beauty, still meaning, even in the broken, the rusted, the discarded." The monk smiled. "Open your bag, Lala. Let the old things go, not by forgetting them, but by allowing them to be part of you, not all of you. Make room for new things, new memories, new joys, new purposes. Your heart is larger than you think. It can hold it all." Over the next few weeks, Lila began to visit the cloth bag monk every morning in the market square. She watched as he collected things, as he gave them away, as he moved through the world with an open heart and an open bag. She began to collect things too, not broken cups or rusty nails, but moments, the way the sun rose over the mountains, the sound of children laughing, the taste of fresh bread from the vendor. She began to see that her life was not empty, even if her hands were. One day, she found a small wilted flower lying in the dirt. She picked it up, brushing off the soil, and brought it to the monk. "For your bag," she said. The monk took it, smiling. "It is beautiful," he said. "But it's wilted," Lila said. "All the more reason to cherish it," the monk said. "It reminds us that beauty is fleeting, that we must appreciate it while we can." He placed the flower in his bag then, pulled out the cracked cup and filled it with water, offering it to Lila. "Drink," he said. Lila drank, the water cool and refreshing, even as it seeped through her fingers. She didn't mind. It felt good to let go, to not care about the cup, about the water, about the things that were lost. As she walked home that day, she held the smooth stone in her hand, feeling its warmth. She thought of the cloth bag monk, of his open bag, his open heart. She thought of her own heart, once closed and heavy, now beginning to open, to lighten, to make room for all that life had to offer, both the broken and the beautiful. And for the first time since the flood, she felt a sense of peace. Not because she had gotten back what she had lost, but because she had learned to carry what remained with an open hand, an open heart, and a bag that was never too full to hold one more thing, one more moment, one more memory, one more reason to smile. The room was so dark that even the edges of the walls blurred into a single mass of shadow. A young monk named Taro stood in the doorway, his heart pounding slightly as he squinted into the darkness. He had been sent here by his master, a task he did not understand. In his hand, he clutched a small oil lamp, its flame flickering weakly, casting only the faintest glow around his feet. Light the room, his master had said simply before closing the door behind him. But do not rush. Take your time. See what there is to see. Taro swallowed hard. The lamp was small, its light dim. How could it possibly illuminate such a large, dark space? He took a step forward, and his foot kicked something a wooden stool by the feel of it. He stumbled, nearly dropping the lamp, and the flame sputtered, casting a brief, jagged shadow on the wall before steadying again. Calm, he whispered to himself, repeating the word his master often used during meditation. Stay calm. He held the lamp higher, but the light barely reached beyond his outstretched arm. The rest of the room remained in darkness, a vast, unknown void that seemed to press in on him, making his breath shallow, his hands clammy. What if there's something in here? He thought, his imagination running wild. What if I'm not alone? He shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought. His master would not put him in danger. This was a lesson. He knew that much. But what was it supposed to teach him? He took another step, moving slowly, carefully, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. Gradually, he began to make out shapes at a table in the corner, a pile of blankets. In the center, a shelf on the wall, its contents hidden in shadow. The lamp's light touched the edge of the table, revealing a chipped ceramic bowl, a wooden spoon, a single dried flower pressed between the pages of a book. Just things, he muttered, feeling a little calmer. Ordinary things, but as he moved further into the room, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, as if resisting the light. The flame on the lamp danced wildly, as if caught in a breeze, even though the room was still. Taro's heart began to race again. He wanted to run back to the door, to fling it open and let the sunlight flood in, banishing the darkness once and for all. Why is this so hard? He said aloud, his voice echoing slightly in the empty room. Why can't I just light the room? He set the lamp down on the table, hoping that a higher position would spread the light further. But it didn't. The light still reached only a few feet, leaving the rest of the room in shadow. Taro slumped onto the stool, feeling defeated. I can't do this, he said, his voice small. The lamp is too small. The room is too dark. He sat there for a long time, staring at the flame, watching it flicker and dance. He thought of his meditation practice, how his mind was often like this room filled with darkness, with fears and doubts and unknowns, and how his attempts to illuminate it with reason or willpower often felt just as futile as this lamp. Trying to light the room. I try so hard to be calm, to be focused, to be enlightened, he thought. But it's never enough. The darkness always comes back, as if in response to his thought. The flame sputtered, then flared up, burning brighter for a moment, casting its light further than before. For an instant, Taro caught a glimpse of the entire room, the shelves, lined with books and scrolls, the blankets neatly folded, the window covered by a thick curtain, blocking out the sun. Then the flame dimmed again, and the darkness closed in. But Taro had seen it. For a moment, he had seen the room as it was not a terrifying void, but a simple, ordinary space, filled with ordinary things. The darkness had not changed, but his perception of it had. He reached out and touched the lamp, feeling its warmth in his palm. "It's not about lighting the whole room," he said slowly, realization dawning. "It's about lighting the part I'm in. It's about seeing what's in front of me, even if the rest is dark." He picked up the lamp and stood up. This time, he did not try to see everything at once. He focused on the small circle of light, moving slowly, examining each object as he came to it: the bowl, the spoon, the book with the dried flower. He ran his fingers over the book's cover, feeling its texture, its weight, before carefully opening it to look at the flower. It was a daisy, its petals faded, but still recognizable, a tiny, fragile thing preserved in paper. "Beautiful," he whispered, smiling to himself. He moved to the shelf, letting the lamp's light fall on the spines of the books. He couldn't read the titles in the dim light, but he didn't need to. He could feel their presence, their weight, their history. He ran his fingers along them, one by one, feeling the smoothness of the paper, the roughness of the bindings, the way some were worn from years of being handled, others still crisp and new. He moved to the pile of blankets, lifting the lamp to see their colors: deep red, forest green, soft blue, faded by time, but still vibrant in their own way. He picked one up, feeling its thickness, its warmth, imagining the hands that had woven it, the bodies it had kept warm. As he moved through the room, something strange happened. The darkness no longer felt threatening. It felt peaceful, like a blanket covering the parts of the room he wasn't ready to see. The lamp's light was enough, more than enough, for where he was, for what he needed to see in that moment. He thought of his mind again, of the darkness there. Maybe it didn't need to be fully illuminated. Maybe he didn't need to banish the fears or doubts or unknowns. Maybe he just needed to be present with them, to hold a little light up to them, to see them for what they were: just thoughts, just feelings, just shadows. He reached the far wall, where a small window was set high up, its curtain drawn. He stood on his tiptoes, pulling the curtain aside just a crack. A thin beam of sunlight streamed in, cutting through the darkness, illuminating a cloud of dust that danced in the air. Taro gasped. The beam of light was narrow, but it was bright, brighter than a lamp could ever be. It touched the far corner of the room, revealing a small wooden chest, its surface carved with intricate patterns, a single key lying on top of it. He could open that chest, he realized. He could let more light in. He could explore every corner of the room, uncover every secret. But he didn't need to, not right now. He let the curtain fall back into place, blocking the sunlight, and the room returned to its previous state of dimness. But it didn't feel the same. Taro no longer felt afraid or defeated. He felt present, grounded. He walked back to the center of the room and sat down on the pile of blankets, setting the lamp beside him. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, letting the silence and the darkness wrap around him like a friend. He thought of the lamp, how its light was small but steady, how it didn't need to compete with the darkness, didn't need to banish it. It just needed to be itself, to shine where it was, when it was needed. He thought of his own light, his kindness, his curiosity, his capacity for love, and how he often felt it was too small, too dim, not enough to illuminate the darkness in the world, in himself. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it didn't need to be enough. Maybe it just needed to be. When he opened his eyes, the room still felt dark, but it no longer felt unknown. He knew there were things in the shadows, but he didn't need to see them all right now. He was content to sit with the light he had, to be where he was in this moment. After a while, he heard a soft tap at the door. He stood up, picked up the lamp, and walked back to the entrance, opening it to find his master standing there, his face calm, his eyes warm. "Did you light the room?" his master asked. Taro thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," he said. "Not all of it, but enough." His master smiled. "Enough is all there is, Taro. The light does not need to conquer the darkness. It just needs to be present with it. Like the moon in the night, sky bright, but not blinding, gentle, but unyielding. It does not fear the darkness, does not fight it. It simply shines, and in doing so, reveals the beauty of the night, the stars, the clouds, the quiet world asleep." Taro nodded, understanding spreading through him like warmth. "The mind is like this room," he said. "It has darkness, but that's okay. I don't need to light it all at once. I just need to hold the lamp steady, to be present with what's in front of me, to trust that the light is enough, even when it feels small." His master placed a hand on Taro's shoulder. "Exactly. And remember, the lamp is not separate from the darkness. It is part of the room, part of the whole. Just as your light, your awareness, your kindness, your presence is part of the darkness, not separate from it. You cannot have one without the other. They define each other, balance each other, make each other possible." Taro looked back at the room, at the small circle of light from the lamp on the table, and the vast darkness surrounding it. He no longer saw a struggle, a battle between light and dark. He saw a harmony, a balance, a whole that was greater than the sum of its parts. "I will remember," he said. As he followed his master back to the main hall, Taro felt the weight of the lesson settle in his heart, calm and steady, like the flame of the lamp in the darkness. He knew that the darkness would always be there in the world, in his mind, in his heart, but so would the light. And that was enough, more than enough. The path wound through the forest like a lazy river, its surface paved with smooth stones that had been worn by centuries of footsteps. Sunlight filtered through the canopy of leaves above, dappling the ground with patches of gold. A traveler walked slowly along this path, his boots crunching on the fallen needles, his eyes fixed on the way ahead. His name was Kale, and he had been walking for months, searching for something he could not name, a sense of purpose, a feeling of peace, a reason to keep going when every step felt like a burden. He had heard stories of a wise woman who lived at the end of this path, a woman who could answer questions that no one else could. So he walked through valleys and over mountains, through rain and shine, his heart heavy with doubt. What if she had no answers? What if there was no point to any of this? What if he walked all this way, only to find nothing? These thoughts swirled in his mind like a storm, making it hard to focus on the beauty around him. He barely noticed the birds singing in the trees, or the way the light changed as the sun moved across the sky, or the scent of pine in the air. He was too busy worrying about the future, too busy replaying the past, too busy wondering if he was doing it all wrong. After several hours, he rounded a bend and saw a small cottage nestled between two large oak trees. Smoke curled from its chimney, and a garden filled with flowers and vegetables stretched out in front of it. An old woman sat on a wooden bench outside the cottage, her hands busy with a basket of herbs she was drying in the sun. She looked up as Kale approached, her eyes warm and wise, as if she had been expecting him. "You have come far," she said, her voice like the rustle of leaves. Kale nodded, stopping in front of her. "I have," he said. "I heard you could help me. I'm struggling with my path. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if I'll ever reach the end. I feel like I'm always stumbling, always making mistakes." The woman smiled, patting the bench beside her. "Sit," she said. Kale sat down, his muscles aching from the long walk. He looked at the path behind him, stretching away into the distance, and felt a wave of exhaustion. "It's so hard," he said. "Every step feels like a fight, like I'm pushing against something." The woman nodded, picking up a sprig of rosemary and crushing it between her fingers, releasing its fragrant oil. "Tell me, Kale," she said, "when you walk, where is your attention?" Kale thought for a moment. "On the end, I suppose. On reaching your cottage. On finding answers. On getting there." "And what about the path itself?" she asked. "The stones beneath your feet, the trees around you, the air you breathe." Kale shrugged. "There. Just there. Obstacles, sometimes. Like when it rains and the path gets muddy, or when a branch falls and blocks the way." The woman laughed, a soft, musical sound. "You see the path as an obstacle, not as a gift?" Kale frowned. "A gift? How?" "Because it is taking you where you need to go," she said. "Not just to my cottage, but to yourself. Every step, every stone, every obstacle, they are all teaching you something. About patience, about resilience, about presence." She pointed to a patch of lotus flowers growing in a small pond at the edge of the garden. "Look at those lotuses," she said. "They grow in muddy water, do they not? But they do not complain about the mud. They do not rush to bloom. They take their time, growing slowly, steadily, until they rise above the water and open their petals to the sun. And when they bloom, they are more beautiful because of the mud, not in spite of it." Kale looked at the lotuses, their pink and white petals glowing in the sunlight. He had never thought about them that way, how they embraced the muck and I. The mire, how they found strength in the places that seemed inhospitable. "I want to be like that," he said. "Steady, strong, beautiful, even in the mud. But I feel like I'm always fighting the mud, like I'm trying to bloom without ever getting my roots dirty." The woman nodded. "That is the mistake, Kale. You think the path is something to overcome rather than something to embrace. You think the mud is something to avoid rather than something to nourish you. You think the journey is just a means to an end rather than the end itself." She stood up, gesturing for Kale to follow her. They walked over to the pond, and she knelt down, dipping her hand into the water and lifting it up, letting the droplets fall back into the pond. "The water is clear here, but beneath the surface there is mud," she said. "The lotus does not separate itself from the mud. It is part of it. It draws strength from it. It is rooted in it, even as it reaches for the sky." Kale looked at his own hands, calloused and dirty from the long walk. He thought of all the times he had wished for an easier path, for a way to avoid the struggles, the pain, the uncertainty. But what would he have learned? What strength would he have gained? "I've been trying to walk without touching the ground," he said, suddenly understanding. "To move through life without really being in it. To reach the end without ever living the middle." The woman smiled. "The path is not about reaching the end, Kale. It is about walking, fully, mindfully, with your attention on each step, not on the horizon. It is about feeling the stones beneath your feet, the wind in your hair, the sun on your face. It is about stumbling and getting back up and learning from the stumble. It is about being present in this moment, exactly where you are." Over the next few days, Kale stayed with the woman, helping her tend to the garden, listening to her stories, walking the path around her cottage slowly, mindfully, as she had taught him. He began to notice things he had never noticed before, the way the light slanted through the trees at dawn, the sound of the stream that ran beside the path, the way the earth smelled after rain. He practiced walking with his attention on his feet, feeling each step as it connected with the ground, feeling the balance, the strength, the simplicity of it. He realized that when his mind was focused on the present, on the act of walking itself, the path felt easier. Not because it was less steep or less rocky, but because he was no longer fighting it. He was flowing with it, like water around a stone. On the morning he decided to leave, the woman walked with him to the edge of the path. "Remember," she said, "the path is not outside of you. It is within you. Every step is a choice to be present, to be grateful, to be alive. When you walk with your heart steady, your mind clear, your attention focused on the here and now, then every step is a lotus, blooming beneath your feet." Cale nodded, feeling a sense of peace he had never known before. "I will," he said. "I won't forget. The path is the way. The walking is the goal." The woman smiled. "Go then, walk, and know that wherever you are, that is where you need to be." Cale turned and began to walk, but this time his steps were different. They were steady, sure, light. He felt the stones beneath his feet, the sun on his back, the wind in his hair. He noticed the birds singing, the flowers blooming, the world around him in all its messy, beautiful glory. He didn't know where he was going, and for the first time, he didn't care. He was walking. That was enough. As he walked, he thought of the woman's words, of the lotuses in the pond, of the path beneath his feet. He realized that life was not about reaching some distant goal, some perfect destination. It was about the steps, the moments, the now. It was about stumbling and getting back up and learning to walk again, more mindfully, more gratefully, more fully. It was about walking, and in walking, finding that the peace, the purpose, the joy he had been searching for were not at the end of the path. They were in the path itself, in the steps, in the present, in the simple, beautiful act of being alive, one step at a time. As these 10 stories drift into the quiet of your mind, like leaves settling on a pond, perhaps you felt a soft shift, a loosening of the knots we tie around shoulds and what ifs. The bamboo shadows taught us to let life's fleeting shapes come and go without chasing. The empty cup reminded us that wisdom seeps in only when we make space. The rain-soaked farmer showed us that peace lives in working with the world, not against it. These tales aren't just stories. They're mirrors, held up gently to show us the stillness already within. The kind that doesn't depend on quiet rooms or perfect days, but blooms in the messy, beautiful middle of now. If these words have touched a place in you that craves more ease, more presence, won't you stay a while? Hit subscribe, and let's keep this conversation going, one story, one breath, one small awakening at a time. Like the bell that lingers long after its chime, may these lessons stay with you. And if they've sparked something bright, a like lets us know. You're here, you're listening, and you're ready to walk this path together. Thank you for being part of this quiet journey. Until next time, breathe deep and let your heart be as open as the sky.